Let's start with diet. Somebody that wants to assess where they're at and make better choices, how do they begin there?
With food, I'd say that like my general recommendations for diet are eat whole foods and eat as organic as possible. So that's, I mean, I'm partial to animal foods. I think that they are the biggest bang for your buck. They're what humans have been eating for however long you believe humans have been on Earth. You get their most viable, bioavailable. We are animals. We are made of animal. So when you eat those things, you make yourself from it. But yeah, so uh, eating whole foods in general, though, is really going to help contribute to good metabolic health. So generally, like I don't think carbohydrates are evil. I don't think we should eat a ton of them because if we lived out in nature today, we wouldn't have that many carbohydrates available for us. So it probably wasn't a huge part of humans' diets. It was just kind of here and there. So, but if your best bet there is whole food carbohydrates and not processed carbohydrates, grain, sugars, things like that. So that's going to be like for some people that's like 70% of the battle because I think that disrupted circadian rhythm is largely what's driving poor metabolic health and changes in mitochondria that allow them not to function properly and creating these poor metabolic issues. And then I think that when you add a processed food diet or standard American diet to that, you're adding fuel to the flames. And so if you take away the fuel to the flames, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to create a lot better metabolic health, but the embers of the fire may still be burning, if you don't optimize the circadian rhythm. But so that could be like I said, 70% of the thing, you're taking away the fuel to the flames. And so that's going to create better metabolic health. And when you create better metabolic health in your mitochondria, they're going to increase charge of those cells much better. So, with the purpose of metabolism is to harvest the chemical bonds or break down the chemical bonds of food to harvest electrons from that food so you can use those electrons to pass down the electron transport chain. And that's used to make ATP, to unfold proteins, to structure water, and the structured water is what holds the charge. And so if you want to hold the charge in your cells and make it much less likely that you receive a pain signal from that tissue to the brain and back down, you want to build the structured water. And the mitochondria make metabolic water. They make structured water. And so they also need proteins to attach themselves onto and hold the charge there. So that's what the ATP does. It unfolds the proteins. And this is all optimizing metabolism. And so from a food perspective, the best way to do that, I say, is center your diet around animal foods, add variety with plant foods, and make sure they're whole food carbohydrates if you do carbohydrates or lots of them. And I would say eat in season. You eat plant foods in season. And that would be where to start.
I want to really drill down into this in season with the plants because you have a really deep, nuanced view of this. And to me, there's two different aspects from reading your book. One being the imprint from the sunlight, and two being deuterium.
Mm-hmm.
So bring both those aspects in and why local is so important.
Yeah.
Specifically for plants.
Yeah. So local and in season, really important for exactly those two things you mentioned. So first, plants kind of have this mechanism of, because they're so tied to their environment, they can't move around like animals can. They imprint the light environment into their I want to say tissues, but into their plant substance, whatever it's called, but into their plant substance because they're so tied to that light environment. And so when you think about electrons, what you're thinking about is like when the sun hits your body, you're making electrons from that sunlight. And so that sunlight, that electron has that kind of that light signal stored in that electron or kind of communicated in that electron. It's kind of a communication, a path of communication. So when plants are grown in a certain environment and then you eat those plants and then you harvest the electrons from those plants, then the light environment from that plant, wherever it was grown, is now being kind of almost downloaded into your physiology, into your mitochondria. And if your mitochondria, your infradian rhythm, the light environment of the mitochondria and how that changes through the local day-night environment of your external environment where you are is different than the light information that you just ate from food that was grown who knows where, because we have food shipped all around the world, it can create confusion. It can create a little bit of mitochondria uncoupling, and those confused signals create just that confusion in your body. So, there's a lot of people who go on carnivore diets, and there may be a lot of reasons why they see improvements in their health, but people say, oh, it's the plant toxins. They're eliminating plant toxins, or maybe they're eating a very low deuterium diet, which we're going to get into next. But it could be that they've just eliminated this different programmed or downloaded light signal that they're getting. That could also be a contributor. So that's why it's important to eat local and in season, or one reason why. So you get similar light signals from your external environment and from what you're eating inside. So the next thing is the deuterium. So our deuterium is a heavy hydrogen, they call it. It's a separate isotope of hydrogen. So everybody, well, not everybody knows, but like it's commonly known that electrons are passed down the electron transport chain, and then that generates hydrogen ions that go up into the inner mitochondrial membrane space, and they come the other way, and they go back to complex 5, and that's what generates this ATP production. And so the deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen that has an extra, I might get it wrong. It's either proton or neutron. I think it's neutron. And so
It's a neutron.
Yeah, neutron. So it comes back across and it tries to go into the ATPase complex 5, and it clogs it up because it's not hydrogen, it's heavy hydrogen. And when it clogs it up, you stop making ATP. So it basically kind of breaks your mitochondria in a way, or makes them less efficient. So that's an issue, because then you're not making ATP, you're not unfolding proteins, you're not maintaining charge and structured water. And so deuterium is found, it's going to be found everywhere. I mean, there's some in animal foods, there's much more in plant foods. You could eat deuterium's even present in water, but there's kind of this hierarchy of what has more deuterium than others. And it's no mistake that the foods that have higher amounts of deuterium, plant foods, things like fruit and even vegetables, are typically available either in the season where there's more sunlight, or if you live in a place where there's sunlight year round, you're going to have that food year round. Like in tropical areas, you can have fruit year round. And that's for a purpose, because our body is able to deplete deuterium through sunlight exposure. So if you're eating those foods and you're also getting ample sunlight, your body's able to kind of get rid of it. Or also generally more toward like water from springs that's more toward the coast, which generally could be warmer, depending on where you are on the earth and on the coastline, is higher in deuterium, rather than water from springs off glaciers or in mountain springs have much less deuterium. So it's all kind of environmentally appropriate. But if, again, we are eating foods out of season, we're having fruit shipped all over the world, and in the middle of January in Virginia, where I am, I'm eating oranges and whatever, then I am accumulating deuterium that could be breaking my mitochondria, and I'm not able to deplete it as well because I'm not getting as much sunlight. So even if I was getting a ton of sun in the winter, it's not as high of an angle. I'm not getting as direct sunlight as I would be in the middle of the summer. So all that stuff's important. And I think, it's playing a role in why we're so chronically ill, why we have this chronic metabolic dysfunction, because we're eating these foods from grown all over the world out of season and not local to our environments.
So the ultimate example here, you gave an example in Virginia, but just to expand upon that, is say a strawberry in the winter grown in California. It's going to get that imprint from the sun, and then say it's shipped up to me in Ontario, so I'll have the wrong imprint from the sun, and it's going to have the deuterium. I'm not going to be getting the amount of sunlight I'd be getting in the summer here, so I'm going to be getting hit by both negatives. So the important highlight here is the fact that somebody in a different part of the world could be thriving on a certain food, whereas somebody like us in the winter up north, that food could be causing all kinds of problems. So it's not as simple as this food's healthy, this food's not. This is the nuance that is so important to bring about, because not a lot of people are talking about this.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. And it also just makes sense logically. Like you were just saying, like when you say it like that, it just makes sense. Like we never would have had foods available that probably weren't within a few miles of when we woke up that day. that weren't grown or raised there, or just happening naturally, wildly. So yeah, it makes sense. And then you think about, yeah, if we're eating foods that are just like you're saying, like if this people in the tropics are eating these, amazing foods, and we attribute the benefits of them eating that amazing food to the different nutrients, like it's high vitamin C or something like that, and like an acerola cherry or something like that, that they're eating this high amount of vitamin C. We're like, oh, that's got to be why it's beneficial. Maybe it's beneficial to them because they're in the right environment to eat that food. It doesn't mean it's going to be beneficial for everyone all over the world. It's incredibly tied to our local environments, light and everything else. So I mean, and there's also just arguments too of just like it's not going to have near the nutrients it would have by the time it gets to you, anyways. So it's not the same food as when you picked it fresh. So yeah, but it's just logical. Like we have to kind of account for that. And like I said, when people go on these carnivore diets, I think that a lot of the benefits they attribute to maybe just better nutrient absorption because it's more bioavailable, or maybe it's just avoidance of plant toxins. But I think the light has a lot to do with it as well, and deuterium has a lot to do with it as well.
You brought up the piece of shipping these things across the world and losing nutrients. That, along with the emissions and the environmental impact, seem to be the two common arguments for eating local. And now you've just brought in two other important pieces in. Again, getting into detail here that's not often talked about.
Yeah, it's not just beneficial for the planet, right? It's beneficial for us, our local planet. I think of us as like a planet, right? So we have to take care of it. And what's usually what's best for the planet as a whole is best for your little local planet as well, generally. And that's one example. Like, if we're eating more local, we're not shipping things around the world, that's better for greenhouse gas emissions. It's better for quality of food. You don't have to spray as many chemicals or preservatives or things on food when you're eating them local. So that's just all better for that kind of stuff. Economically, it's cheaper. But also it's just better health wise, like we talked about for us too. And that's generally how it goes when you think about that kind of stuff.
Coming back to the imprint piece, sunlight causing an imprint on plants. The other aspect you bring up in the book with that's detrimental is to the gut lining. Talk about that connection.
Yeah. So, when your bacteria in your gut are breaking down the food so that you can digest it so it can be absorbed through the gut lining, light is being emitted. So because again, we're breaking it down to harvest the chemical energy, the chemical bonds that store the energy. So when they're getting broken down, they're releasing light. And the bacteria in the gut, they don't have like light receptors in their cells like we do, which means that we're absorbing that light and the bacteria is not. And so the gut lining is taking it. Kind of think about like a projector screen, like going on to the lining of the artery. And again, if the gut lining is kind of like an external environment inside our body, or it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be kind of sealed off. So we're kind of like a donut if you think about it. And so if that external environment is getting a very different signal in the gut than our external environment, like our skin is getting from the sunlight and natural light that we're being exposed to out here, that's a very confusing signal, and the body doesn't know what's happening. And people have talked about a lot about how autoimmunity and all these diseases like that, they start in the gut. There's this gut associated lymphatic tissue, and all these types of things. And it's like, well, potentially it could be because we're getting very confusing signals based on our external environment and the internal environment from the food that's being the signal of food is being projected onto our gut. Not to mention the fact that our external environments are filled with artificial light and things like that, which could just be even more confusing. So if I would wonder how much of that plays a role and how it's just the body's doing exactly what it's supposed to do given the signals that it's getting. If we change the signals and make them more coherent or cohesive to our external environment, we may get a different result.
Given what we've just shared, somebody up north in Canada like myself, are there any plants in the wintertime? I can think of things like kale, you might be able to grow that. Arguably not a healthy food anyways, for other reasons. But somebody up in Ontario, what do we do in the winter? Obviously the obvious is to go carnivore, but are there any plants you can think of that would be helpful during that time?
Yeah. Well, I don't know because I don't know exactly what grows up there. Um, and I don't even know exactly what plants would grow in my environment. I just go carnivore in the winter because that just makes the most sense. But I think that one thing is we have to put this in the context of what it was like for humans in the winter in Ontario, right? You probably weren't eating every day. You were hunting when you could, and maybe coming across some plant foods you could nibble on, but it was pretty scarce. And generally, that's what winter is really supposed to be about. We have lives now where we can't kind of hunker down and take it easy. But if you think about it, trees die in winter, bears hibernate. It's just supposed to be this time of more rest and relaxation. We get more darkness hours, which means more melatonin, which means we're supposed to be getting a signal to sleep more and kind of rest, and we don't do that. So we likely wouldn't have needed that much food or as much food as we do in the summer when we're more active and everything. So that's probably not helpful for the modern day person that just has to do things. But I guess the closest thing you could get is just stick to more animal foods in winter, and try and rest and sleep as much as you can, like more in the winter. That would be more appropriate, I would say.
As we continue to build upon this puzzle, bringing in, we've already done diet, but sunlight and grounding, we can quickly see how somebody who wants to be preventative or has a chronic disease living down south in a tropical area is just so much easier and more advantageous on all those fronts.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what everybody does in the winter. They go vacation at the beach or down in the tropics, if they can. It's like the place that choose they go because you're able to, again, get outside in sunlight, put your feet directly on the earth. Um, More whole plant foods are available there. So you can eat more whole plant foods there. Whereas if you're stuck up here in the winter, really what's technically available to us is animal foods. So it's attractive, right? And the first thing you do when you get to the beach, most people anyways, is take their shoes off. And maybe that's because the sand feels good. Maybe it's because they just know this is, and like inherently, this is better for me. This is a better environment. And we kind of seek it out.
When it comes to deuterium in the body, how long does it stay in the body? And is there a way to detox or get it out of the body quicker?
That I don't know, but I think that one potential way is mitophagy. So if you get a bunch of mitochondria that are clogged up with deuterium, one way that you can help purge that is mitophagy, killing off old mitochondria so your body makes new healthy ones. And that process is stimulated by a lot of things that we see in winter, actually. So maybe some fasting, maybe some lower carb diets like ketosis, maybe some cold exposure, different things like that. I think there's, again, no coincidence that those are things we have naturally been exposed to in winter that also induce this autophagy, mitophagy that happens with those things that, again, we're supposed to be doing in winter, resting and restoring and rejuvenating. So yeah, more sleep, more optimized sleep, higher melatonin levels because of more darkness signals. All those things would be useful for those types of things, and that's what's supposed to happen.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
How much serotonin you make when you get UVA light in mid-morning is going to dictate how much melatonin you can make later when you block blue light after sunset. So the storage of serotonin, that's going to be converted to melatonin later. So I tell people